Hi, everybody. Welcome to our practicum highlights, our highlight reel, if you will, of what we did during this practicum.
So our practicum was 2 months at Wen High School here in Taiwan. I'm Carolina.
And I'm Leslie. So first, we're going to start off with why we wanted to teach in Taiwan.
I think this is really important to start off with because we could have stayed home to teach, but we chose an international practicum. And a big part of this is because of all of the immigration we have in Canada and all of the students that we have that speak English as an additional language. So they're not native English speakers when they come into our classrooms. Right now in Calgary, the percentage is around 70% of students in each classroom will speak more than one language. That doesn't mean that every single one of them is English as a second or third or fourth language. It just means that they have such a diverse set of needs when it comes to learning languages.
Mm-hmm.
And being here helps us teach that language, even if we're not teaching English at home. So, some numbers for you. In Canada, 25% of people are immigrants. They've immigrated to Canada, maybe first generation, second generation, but you're still in a household that's speaking another language. And then we've got 200 different languages spoken around the country.
So a couple main points here. One is cultural immersion. We wanted to open our worldview even more. Coming to Taiwan, you're in a role where your roles kind of are reversed from the student's perspective. So when we're teaching in Canada, that student who speaks additional language or has English as is not their native language, they experience what we're experiencing right now, where we don't understand what's going on. We can't speak it, we can't understand, we can't read or write. And that's how our students feel. And it's very, very difficult and it's hard, especially when you're at a young age, when you're still trying to learn things. So having that position and role that we're in, where the roles have been reversed, we get to experience that and really try to understand where our students are coming from in a Canadian setting. We also get to build professional connections in other countries. The international program here, Teacher Ben, is never getting rid of us because we want to do pen pals across the world and create that connection with students globally. And I think that's really important just because it allows students to open their worldview as well. We don't, from my understanding, like when I was in high school, I didn't have that experience and I didn't even know that we could do that in high schools. So I think it's really cool that we get to now bring that experience to our students. We also get new teaching opportunities. Both of us don't actually teach English in Canada. I teach social studies and Carolina teaches science. So this is a completely new experience on how to teach English and how to teach a language. We can see, even with our students, it's so hard to just learn a language, to learn that language in the target language. And then now we're also having that kind of perspective that our students back home are not only learning the target language, but they're learning content with that language, like social studies or science. So it really gives us skills and tools that we can take home to kind of help our students that are learning in that language, in English.
And I think one other thing that's really important is it's taught us how valuable representation is. We know that it's important because we have so many different students. You want them to feel represented. But being here and being the only Canadians in the school, we got so excited when there was something about Canada that we got to share with them. So now we know even the smallest detail for our students will be so important and make them feel so included.
Yeah. So our main takeaways from this practicum is that teaching English is so hard.
Yeah, so difficult.
When we're learning English in like an English school, you're not learning. It's very different because you're just learning how to do English. There's not that like really professional, formal way of, oh, this is the past continuous tense or this is this verbiage. We don't get that. So teaching it where you're teaching English in a sense where you are now using those phrases is really, really hard.
Yeah, learning English as a native speaker and learning English as an additional language are two completely different teaching styles.
So we found tons of ways to kind of change our traditional teaching to help our students. So one of the main things we used were being super theatrical and using our actions and physical comedy to kind of help them understand what we were talking about.
And keep them engaged, because some of the students, their English is much lower level. So if you're in a classroom where you really don't understand what's happening, it's super easy to nod off, to fall asleep
Not
even.
care.
Yeah, to not care, because why would you if you don't understand what's happening? So we would use a lot of acting and theatrics and just being really loud to get them engaged and a little bit excited, even if they didn't understand.
Yeah. We talked a lot slower with our English classes, especially the grade 7s where they're still getting used to conversing in English. So talking a lot slower, adding photos, and just changing our traditional methods. And discovering ways to make it fun. I think making it fun makes them so engaged. They like want to learn English, because as we got through the practicum by our second last week, they were all like excited for English class and they wanted to try.
Yeah. And through these like theatrics and games and all the ways that we could make it fun, that's a new way that we learned to connect with the students. Because back home, it's a lot easier to connect with the students when you can speak to them and when you understand the same language, then you can ask them personal questions. But here, you can't do that. You can't ask them what their favorite songs are, artists, or sports, because a lot of the time they don't have that vocabulary to converse with you. And by the end, it was a bit easier because they got more comfortable. But at the beginning, it was all about fun and games and just getting them comfortable to be themselves around us. And that's how we created relationships with them.
And when they feel comfortable, you can see the students taking more risks. They are willing to try and they're not afraid to make mistakes. Especially in English class, like it's really scary when you are raising your hand and we're asking you like, someone tell me what the reason why you don't run in the aquarium, and they're like, please don't look at us. But when you get comfortable with them, they're like, oh, I can try. And I think that's also where the theatrical piece comes in, because we look silly and we're embarrassing ourselves, so they feel more comfortable being like, oh, I can also be silly. I don't have to feel embarrassed because our teachers are way more embarrassing than us.
Yeah, that was a huge thing. We were definitely embarrassing ourselves.
So I think as soon as they felt comfortable, they were willing to take those risks. So what we're going to talk about today is the classes we taught, so grade 7, grade 8, and grade 11, as well as some things we did around Weiwen and our practicum. So first, grade 7.
We taught 8 different classes, and for all of these classes, we co-taught. So we were both team teaching in the classroom, which was really helpful, having such a large classroom. Just having any number of kids, having more adults is always awesome. So we had 8 different grade 7 classes, and within those classes, there was different levels of English, but even the classes themselves had different levels of English proficiency.
So the purpose of the class was to encourage the students to speak English. It was English conversation. The teacher for the class is a foreign teacher, and it's not the local teacher. So his job is also just to encourage the students to speak. So we got to take over those 8 classes. We wanted to bring in more activities to get them up and moving around, and make speaking more fun and interactive. This was really jarring at first. The students are not used to getting up in the middle of class to like play a game. So the first class, they were all like, don't look at me, don't come near me, do not interact with me. But as we got more comfortable and as we were also being silly and goofy, they felt more comfortable and were actually interacting with us and doing the activities.
They started to trust us more, and they knew that we weren't there to penalize them if they made a mistake, or if they spoke out of turn, or if they got up in the middle of class because we were playing a game. We weren't there to be the bad guy.
Mhm.
We just wanted them to interact with us and to participate. And once they started to trust that that's what we were there for, they really got into it.
Mhm. And with that too, we weren't super concerned, I think, with like getting through the content, because if they were talking with us, that was a win.
Yeah, this specific class didn't really have a curriculum or content to get through, which was really nice. We had a lot of freedom.
Mhm.
They just wanted us to get them to practice speaking the language.
So again, using theatrics and over-the-top acting to make them feel more relaxed. We ran around the classroom, we honked at them,
We made them all howl because we were describing Canadian animals and we taught them what a wolf sounds like. So we howled at them and then we made them as a class howl back. They thought that was ridiculous and they didn't think we were serious, but we were serious.
it was awesome. So one of the classes we had was on adjectives. So we're describing what a bear sounds like, and we're scaring the kids and being like, and they're just like, what is happening? But then they feel more relaxed. They're like, oh, this is a fun class. It's not super serious. We can just relax and be comfortable and have fun.
Yeah. So some activities we did were Heads Up, Jeopardy. Pictionary was a little bit less talking, but they still got to draw and we got them to describe what they drew a little bit. And then Find Someone Who. So find someone who likes this animal or who can do this skill. And those were more structured sentences, but it still got them up and moving. And we always involved ourselves in the activities. I think that's also really important to know that our barriers are down and we're having fun so that they can too.
Yeah. So we really learned how to scaffold the lessons more and better for the classes who their English skills weren't super strong. So we included more pictures, we had less words, added examples, even examples from Taiwan, and adding those cultural aspects as well, and including videos. And one of the big things that we got as feedback was to give the students options, which I think was really important, especially in the classes where they have a harder time with English. So in the picture here, you can see we added 6 sentences that they could fill in, 6 choices to fill into the sentences. Because in our first class, we were asking, why do you follow the rules at a museum? And no one obviously was answering. But as soon as we got the feedback, hey, maybe give them some options. And those were from the local teachers, which are amazing. They gave us such great feedback.
Yeah, this is where we learned from the teachers here. And that was the whole purpose of going to an international practicum, is learning how to properly scaffold those strategies and how to properly apply teaching English into social studies or science context.
Yeah. So giving them choices is a great example of that. So how we changed our lessons, because we teach grade 7 classes.
Yes.
The first lesson was always a little off because we're still kind of getting our footing. How can we scaffold this? How can we structure it so that they are getting the most out of the class? And by the 8th lesson, it usually changed.
Yeah, this specific lesson, the do you like can you, we changed probably every single class, and it was really nice because we were allowed that freedom to kind of change it however we wanted to and see if something worked and something didn't. And the students had fun either way most of the time.
So for our first class, we tried repeating. So it like in the picture it says, "Do you like squirrels?" We would get them to say, "Do you like squirrels?" And then they say, "I do like squirrels." And then they say, "I do," and just boring.
Yeah.
So boring. The kids were not engaged. It was boring for us. We were like, we cannot do this for an entire week. We have to change it. So then we changed it to raising your hand. So if you do like it, raise your hand. If you don't like it, put your hand down or whatever. Still boring. They weren't really talking with us at that point either. They're just like, this is stupid.
A little bit.
And then lastly, we tried actually getting them to stand up and move to different sides of the classroom. So we would ask, do you like squirrels? If it's yes, move to the left. If it's no, move to the right.
And with this one, you do have to be a little careful. Classroom management comes to play here, especially with grade 7. So they get a little rowdy. But they had fun.
Yeah.
So, and they were talking, so that's what's important.
We also, in our classes where their English was more proficient, we also asked them why. So we would say, why do you like squirrels? Or why do you like pandas? Or whatever the question was, to get them to also start thinking about how they can answer that.
Mm-hmm.
And then an important part with this too, because this lesson was also, can you do something? We answered the questions as well. We were moving to sides of the room to make students feel comfortable, so they didn't feel embarrassed if they can't swim or whatever the skill was.
Then we would also almost pretend that we can't swim and we join them so that they weren't standing alone. The purpose of this is not to like shame them for not being able to do something.
Yeah. So, and like, we don't want them to feel alone, especially when you're learning that target language, because it can feel super lonely. And we want to make sure everyone's comfortable. So us answering made things a lot better too.
Yeah. And one more thing we did that I think was really beneficial in the grade 7 classroom and grade 8 as well moving forward is that when we asked a student to answer a question or asked them to speak a sentence or anything and they couldn't do it, we would always offer the option that they could ask a friend. And that way the friend could maybe tell them what to say, but we just wanted to hear the words come out of their mouth. We didn't care where the answer came from.
Yeah.
We just wanted them to say a sentence in English, for them to be able to pronounce the sentence and use the correct grammar. That's what was important to us. It's not that, oh, the answer was right or they thought of it themselves. No, we wanted teamwork. We didn't want anyone to feel isolated. Excuse me. Anyone to feel isolated. We just wanted them to feel included, but not alone.
Yeah. And I think that's really important because again, it's like learning a new language and being in a classroom when we're only speaking English can feel lonely, especially if you don't understand. So being like usually what happened with a stronger English student would be like, I know the answer, pick me, and be like, oh, why don't you help your friend? And then that also directs them for that collaboration as well.
Mm-hmm.
So here is one of our wonderful grade 7 classes. And yeah, we loved grade 7. It was awesome. It was my first time teaching grade 7, and it was a much better experience than I was thinking it was.
Yeah, they were so wonderful. This was us saying goodbye. Mm-hmm. We'll miss them so much.
Okay, so on to grade 8. Grade 8 was interesting only because we only had 2 lessons with each class.
So we kind of like popped in and out of this classroom just to help review and once again to bring in some games and activities into the class. So we had 207 and 208. We went over some past continuous tense grammar with them and then reviewed vocab. Mm-hmm. And then we also had an advanced grade 8 class, but there's only 3 students in it. So that one was a lot more personal.
Mm-hmm. Again, same thing with grade 7. They all have different levels of English proficiency within the class and between the classes. Okay, so for 207 and 208, we did this with both classes. We reviewed past continuous tense and used Halloween to help review it.
So this one is really funny because, as we said at the beginning, learning English as a native speaker and learning English as an additional language, very different. When the teacher asked us to review past continuous tense with us, we both had ChatGPT up asking it,
what is past continuous tense? Because we know what it is and how to use it, we just don't know what it's called. So as soon as we saw examples, we were like, yes, but hearing just, can you teach past continuous tense? We're like, and then Google.
Yeah, we're like, oh my gosh, we don't remember what it is. And that really put it into perspective that there's just so many different ways to teach a language and to learn a language.
Yeah, so for this class and this lesson, we used Halloween to help review it. We did this lesson during the week of Halloween, so it was a little fun and festive. We played 2 games. With 207, we'll explain picture prompt, and then 208 will explain the trash can toss. So picture prompt, the goal is to create a sentence using that past continuous tense. So we split the class up into 6, 7, 8 groups. I can't remember. A lot of groups, and they all had a little whiteboard that we made, and there would be a picture on the board, for example, this photo here, and they had to describe the picture using past continuous tense. And
so
then
there was no like correct sentence that we had for them. There could be many different answers for this. So if they wrote, the kids were standing in a line, the kids were trick-or-treating, the kids were dressing up. Any of those are in past continuous tense, so
They would get a point
they would get a point.
for that. And then again, like we said before, we wanted each student to do something. It wasn't just one kid taking over the whole group. So for each picture, someone new had to write the answer down. So that was picture prompt. And then with this specific class, we also did a review on career vocab.
Yeah, this one just did not go great. This was one of our boring classes that
Yeah.
we would definitely change if we had to.
Yeah, this was really, really rough.
This is just what...
Essentially what we did was we had someone we had someone be the interviewer for a job, and then this other person would be the interviewee. So we gave them sentence structures to help, but we didn't present it in a way that was feasible, because they were both on different slides, and it was just they did not enjoy it.
They didn't have fun.
I didn't enjoy it. They didn't enjoy it.
No. We just wouldn't change it. Yeah.
So this one, it was good because we got to review vocab, but it was also good because we saw, like, this doesn't work. How will we change it for next time?
Yeah, next time, essentially, we would just make it more fun. Make it, gamify it more than we did.
Exactly. And then, again, 208, same lesson with 207, but this time we played trash can toss. They loved this game. 208 and 207 loved it. It was so fun. Essentially, we split the class into two teams, and there would be a question on the board, like, what were you doing after school yesterday? And the students, a new student each round, would have to come up and write a sentence using past continuous tense. And then if they had a sentence using past continuous tense, they got 1 point and a chance to throw a paper ball into a bucket, essentially. And if they got the ball into the bucket, they'd get an extra point.
Yeah, and we always wanted someone new to come up and write the sentence, but they could ask a friend to come up with them, or a group of them could go up to the board together, just so that somebody new was practicing writing it and practicing in that tense, but they could still get help. Mm-hmm. And that's something that we just practiced throughout all of our weeks here.
Mm-hmm. And it was really fun. I think this is fun, especially because you can make really good relationships with the students. I was the one holding the basket, so if the one team was kind of not getting as many points, I'd help them shoot the basket and cheat and whatever. So it was really, really fun, and They enjoyed it. They were like, "You cheated." I'm like, "I'm the teacher. I can do what I want."
And they bragged so much about their basketball skills, but none of them were getting it into the trash can.
We were like, "You don't play basketball." They're like, "Yeah, we do." So
that was really funny.
Yeah, it was really, really fun. I think that broke the barriers a lot with both the grade 8 classes, even though, again, we only had 2 lessons with them.
And so...
Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay. Never mind. I thought we were going somewhere else with this.
So, and then with our last lesson with the 208 class, we introduced Unit 5 vocab. So we did 3 kind of activities. We had story time to introduce the vocab words, which we'll show on the next slide. We did word matching. Mm-hmm. So each student got 2 or 3 words, and there was photos at the front and back of the classroom, and there was 2 teams. And then they had to match the words with the pictures as fast as possible to win. And then we also wrote 1-sentence stories, where they write a sentence using one of the vocab words, and then it actually created a story with the row that they were in.
Yeah, and I think this is a great example of how we improved our lesson from career vocab to this vocabulary, because that one just was not a great way to review vocab or to teach vocab or to engage the students in any way, pretty much. But this was awesome. They had a great time.
There was competition involved, which students love competition. We know that. So they were able to really engage in that.
Yeah. And so we put the story into context, or the vocabulary into context. And I think this is really important when teaching vocab in general. You can see, like, at the bottom, it says take the elevator, go straight down. It's putting elevator even into context, even if that's not one of the words, or go to the bank and withdraw some money, because you need cash. That explains what a bank is without just translating bank from English to Mandarin, because that's not really giving you what the word is and how to explain it. That's just telling you this is the translation. Like, that's not entirely helpful when you need to put it into a comprehension test.
Yes.
And you just know the translation, but you don't really know what it means. This really helped with that.
Yeah.
And then we put the pictures and the vocabulary together during the game, and then now they had a solidified contextual definition plus a picture, so that was wonderful.
Yeah. Again, to make this more interesting, I was walking around the classroom.
Yeah.
The acting skills came out. I was acting it out, adding different voices, involving students. I would walk up to their desk being like, "Hi, nurse, excuse me, what floor is room 204 on?" And they were like,
and we had 3 of these stories, so we were worried that maybe they would lose engagement by the 3rd one, but Leslie did a phenomenal job at putting in her drama skills in this, because she was walking around the whole classroom. They were like turning their heads to pay attention, and then they would look back at the screen for the words.
Yeah.
And it was really awesome. They had a great time. Even though it was just reading a boring story I got off ChatGPT.
Yeah. Work smarter, not harder. ChatGPT, you put in, make a cool story using these vocab words.
In context.
In context for English language learners. Boom, it spit it out. Our local teacher was like, "That was an amazing story." And we were like, ChatGPT.
Yeah.
And then for advanced 8, we only had the one lesson of Halloween and past continuous tense. But unfortunately, they did not get to have as much fun because they are an advanced class, so we wanted to challenge them a little bit. So they did not get the fun games, but we did do a one sentence story. I didn't change that. It was one sentence story, so they say a sentence in using past continuous tense, and then the next person would do it, and they had to create a whole story.
Which isn't necessarily grammatically correct, because you wouldn't say every sentence in past continuous tense, but we just wanted to challenge them to think in that way, so that each of them was thinking up a sentence in that tense. And
it's not about...
I thought it was funny because they kept making the story end with somebody dying, or Halloween, somebody being chased by some animal or some scary monster.
Yeah.
So it ended up being really funny.
Yeah.
And even though they didn't get to play the game because it's difficult to play certain games with just 3 kids, they still enjoyed it.
And then we did right or wrong. And this, I think, with advanced students, it's really easy to just pick the right answer, but it's more difficult to pick out the wrong answer.
Yeah, and fix it.
So we had different sentences. I think we had 10 or 15, and they took the sentence. Either they had to decide it was right or it was wrong, and then how to fix it. So, and they did a really good job. They crushed it. So.
Yeah, they did awesome.
Again, with the grade 8s, we only had 2 classes and 2 lessons with each class, but we were able to use the knowledge we had gained from the grade 7s. So again, being theatrical with the stories and adding photos and speaking slowly and giving them options was really, really great.
Yeah, sometimes I think maybe it's a misconception they're a grade older, so their English must be so much better, or even a little bit better, but that's not the case. That doesn't mean that every single student will understand you when you're speaking fast. So we really had to slow down our talking compared to how we talk normally.
Yeah. And then lastly, grade 11. This is a bilingual literacy course. 501 at Waywen is a bilingual class.
So they're a special case. Their language is their English language is very proficient. They can all
have a full conversation with us.
They understand our slang. We don't have to speak slower. So this was almost like teaching back home, just with like a slightly lower level, especially with teaching Shakespeare.
Yeah, which we did. We taught Macbeth. Something we were not expecting to be teaching. We thought our preconception was that we were going to be teaching all of our classes would be like the grade 7 English class, and then teacher Ben was like, "So Macbeth," and we were like, "No."
That's something that I never ever thought I would have to teach as a science teacher. I was very scared.
All of our classmates back home were like, "Okay, Leslie, you could teach Macbeth, but Carolina, no."
But we did it.
And it was awesome. We used a simplified version, which is good and bad for, like, it's both reasons. It's good because it's simplified English, so it's not using Shakespearean language.
Yeah, and so then they get to experience Shakespeare in
With
any
them.
way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it also simplifies the entire story. So because Shakespeare is so complicated and there's so many themes and storylines and
Even characters were cut out.
characters,
Yeah.
it's hard to get them to understand the full story of Macbeth with those things being cut out. So we had to kind of pick and choose what was important in Macbeth for them to really focus on, and the other stuff kind of brush under the rug.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so we divided the book. It was a short book. I think it was only 60 small pages, and we divided it into 4 so that it would take us 4 classes to read it, and the classes here are 50 minutes long. So the first bit of class we would read, and then they would work on assignments and stuff. The very first one we just did read aloud, and we just read it to them. And a piece of feedback we got from teacher Ben is that it was really boring, which it was. It was very boring. Even though they were following around along and they were highlighting stuff in their books, they still it just wasn't fun, and that was why we're here. We want to have fun.
And then, like, we even asked for feedback from our professor from our university, and he was like, yeah, reading out loud does nothing. Like, for the student who is reading and for the students who are following along, it doesn't help in any way. So I would change that. And we were like, great, let's. So we then tried doing Act It Out, which was amazing. We did scaffold it, and so by the last class, they were doing everything. But for the first class where we added it, we narrated the book, so we read it for them, but they were coming up and acting it out. And before we even started reading, we were like, okay, who's gonna be Lady Macbeth? Who's gonna be Banquo? Like, everyone has to have a character and a role, and then you come up.
And we made sure to involve every student. So there'd be a Lady Macbeth up, but they would only be Lady Macbeth for like 1 page, and then they would sit back down. So it was a constant rotation. And we were worried it would be a little too chaotic at first, but they did really well with it, and they got into it, got very involved. Some of them didn't like it because they didn't like being up in front of the class, but that's okay. They got to sit down after 1 page.
And then the second class, they started narrating. We also started acting it out with them. So if everyone had gone, we could tell like no one really wanted to go, be like, okay, you guys can have a break. I'm Lady Macbeth. And then that's also super engaging for them because we're ridiculous and we'll fully act it out with voices and everything.
Absolutely.
So then they're engaged again. And teacher Ben also joined us. And then for that last class, they were narrating and acting it out.
Yeah, it was completely on them. And honestly, they did a great job. It was really entertaining for us.
Entertaining for us. We gave them some props. So it was great.
Yes.
And during the classes where we actually were acting it out, they were following along with us in the book. They were watching the actors. They were listening to us. They were fully engaged.
And we made sure to have a post-reading discussion about what had happened, what was important, like key takeaways from that section, just so that nothing fell under the rug.
And then, so they have a couple assignments for this book. The first one is marking their books, a couple formative first. Marking their books, something we're not going to be checking, but we told them it's really helpful for you so you can see what's happening where. So we added dialogue, things that they think might be important,
Literary devices,
literary terms, which we did teach them, and
any vocab that they don't know.
Yeah, any vocab. For highlighting?
Yes.
Yeah. They highlighted vocab, dialogue, what they think might happen, and literary devices. And literary devices we explained to them and gave them a cheat sheet so they could look back and check on it.
Yeah. And then we also had these progression worksheets, which is something they would work on after we read it. And it was essentially just a big document with 4 sections for each section that we read, and each section contained 3 tables. 1 table was the characters, 1 was themes, and then 1 was literary devices. So we would drop hints during the readings, the post reading discussion, and then they would go into it and type up what they knew, what they were inferring, what they thought would happen, to help them for their final project. And I kept telling them that this is for them. We're not going to be grading it, but it needs to be done so that they can refer back to it when they're working on their final project.
Yeah. And then lastly, we did task cards for the first 3 sections, just not the final one because we wanted to start the summative assessment. But for the 3 sections, we had task cards based on each section. These were just little silly, goofy, fun assignments, you could say, or
This was all
tasks.
these were so much fun. They were hilarious. The kids loved it.
So for example, in our PowerPoint here, we have like write a modern text message exchange. So Lady Macbeth saying, "Hey, what's up? Guess what? I'll be king." Pretend Lady Macbeth is a sports coach, right? One failure can't stop you from following your dreams. Keep going and never give up. And
Like,
she's talking about murder. Like,
yeah.
it's so silly. My favorite one is create a playlist for Lady Macbeth getting ready, for Macbeth to come home. So she's planning like King Duncan's murder, and the students were like putting Seven Rings by Ariana Grande and like just silly stuff.
I loved the one where we made an emoji. So recreate this scene, but with all emojis, and they were all like sword and death and blood emojis, and it was so funny. But we could hear the giggling, and they were doing it, and the bell rang, and nobody got up.
Yeah.
They were still working on it, so that was really nice to see that they were enjoying it.
I think with this, it gives them a different perspective
Mhm.
on Macbeth because, like, traditionally when we're at home, we learn like the Shakespearean play.
Mhm.
We learn it with all that language and innuendos and everything with that. So one of the assignments we always do when we're doing Shakespeare is putting a modern take on it.
Mhm.
So we kind of took that and simplified it in these task cards. We wanted them to still have fun with Macbeth, but also still understand it. So, for example, the songs, they had to think about, oh, what is her motivation? What are the ambitions? What's Lady Macbeth's goals? And they really were doing that with the songs.
Yeah, and like,
Play.
what is the mood and theme of this section, or
Yeah.
her thoughts?
Yeah.
And how am I going to choose a song to represent that?
Yeah.
And it also gets them to care, because sometimes with Shakespeare, it's like so old, and students are like, oh, this is in the past. Why is this still important? But the themes and what it's saying about society is still relevant.
Yeah.
And this kind of puts that a little bit more into perspective for them.
Yeah. And then for our final project, our summative assessment, they'll be making a promotional poster. They've started it this week, which is awesome. They essentially are making a movie poster for Macbeth to try to captivate someone to read it or watch it. And then they just do a rationale connecting the character, a theme, and what the bigger message is to society. So really excited to see what they come up with.
Yeah.
So far so good from what I'm seeing, but again, they're going to use those progression worksheets to kind of help with the characters, with the themes, and representing that.
Yeah, so you can really see that what we've taught here is very different. We had a class where it was just fun and games, conversational English. We had Shakespeare in a bilingual class, so 2 incredibly different classes, and then a grade 8 grammar class, which the English wasn't just fun and games. It was like actually applying the grammar to it.
Yeah.
So that was good.
And then lastly, just some fun things we did here at Weiwen. So this photo up here was from our first day. We had just gotten off 14-hour travel day.
Yep.
So that was really fun.
This is just a little example of how much fun you can have at an international practicum. Like, it's so fun learning about the new culture and having a new group of students with different ideas and different motivations. It's just so fun to be around this kind of energy, and we're so excited that we get to take it back home and apply it in a local context.
Yeah. So that is our presentation.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening.
Have fun at yours.